Scott just made the point.
Used to be a lot more secure, not just. After a marathon 18-day negotiating session in Vienna, the Obama administration has reached a potentially historic deal with Iran regarding its nuclear program. But the devil, or perhaps I should say the great Satan, is in the details. I'm Steve Green. This is Trifecta, and with me now, your Trifecta stalwarts, Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. Gents, the ink isn't even dry on this 80-page agreement, and important details have yet to be released to the public. However, a chorus of complaints has already been raised from Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, who said the deal is an historic mistake which gives Iran hundreds of billions of dollars with which it can fuel its terror machine. Here in the U.S., there are plenty of skeptics in both parties on Capitol Hill. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut says he isn't sure the deal adequately protects the interests of the U.S. or our allies, and GOP House Speaker John Boehner accused Obama of abandoning his own goals and fueling a nuclear arms race right on the heart of the Middle East. Bill, let me play devil's advocate here. It's always been my position that short of a war, there's no way to stop any reasonably technically competent country from obtaining nuclear weapons if they really want them. The agreement reached by Washington and Tehran would seem to at least slow down Iran's nuclear ambitions. So isn't that deal better than no deal?
You nailed it in the beginning, short of a war. So let's go to war. Any questions? You know, this idea of avoiding war at all costs is what gets you the big wars, right? I don't know how many times I've said this on this show and elsewhere. By refusing to stand up to tyrants, dictators, murderers, and liars when they're weak, it guarantees that you're going to have to stand up to them when they're strong. This is the lesson of history again and again and again and again. We're dealing with Iran like we're not holding any cards at all, like this rogue nation is in charge of the world. It's a simple thing. If they want to go to war with the United States, then they can respond to our attack to take out their nuclear weapons, period. Right? I know people think, my God, this is raving madness. It's not raving madness. It's actual history. It's reasonable and it's logical. We either stop them before they have nuclear weapons, or we're going to have to deal with them when they do have nuclear weapons. Those are the two choices on the table. There's not a happy third choice. Negotiating with Iran is like negotiating with Lucy while she's holding the football. How many times do they have to pull that thing away from us? How many times do we have to go lying on our back looking up at the sky before we understand that they are masters of telling us what we and the rest of the world want to hear? They're a regime of liars and a regime of cheats, and they're a regime of people who have a very clear mission, and that mission is to accomplish their goal of achieving nuclear weapons so that they can annihilate Israel. We either face this now while they don't have nuclear weapons, or we face it later when they do. I seriously will never understand the density of people and the power of wishful thinking to think that there's a good choice on this table. There's not a good choice on this table. We have to wake up and face that music. There is no good choice here. We have a bad choice and we have a worse choice. So let's get down to business and start acting like adults. The way these people understand negotiations is for their reactors to go away, their centrifuges rather. When their processing plants go away, they'll know we're serious. Every time we've made a deal with them, Steve, they've cheated on the deal. And they cheat on the deal before the deal's even signed, let alone the ink being dry.
Yeah, well, you talk about kicking the football with Lucy. We've had administration after administration kick this can down the road since 1979. And I should also mention a few details leaked just before we began taping. And according to Senator Tom Tillis, the concessions to Iran in this deal include no snap inspections of nuclear sites and no resolution of the issue of weaponization activities. So essentially, this is a deal without teeth. Now, Scott, my other position has always been that you can't negotiate with Iran in a vacuum, although apparently that's exactly what Secretary of State John Kerry has done. The deal doesn't say anything about releasing Iranian hostages, including Washington Post reporter Jason Rezaian. It doesn't do anything to end Iran's support for the odious Assad regime or its sponsorship of international terrorism. Worst of all, right now in Fallujah, the Iraqi city which 95 Marines gave their lives to take back from Iranian-backed insurgents in 2004. Right now, Iranian militiamen are poised to take that city back from ISIS and help cement Tehran's control over wide swaths of Iraq. Is it worth, Scott, sweeping tremendous issues like these to bring Iran back into the family of nations? It's even awkward to say that sentence.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it does any of that. I mean, in addition to all the stuff that we failed to negotiate on and all the stuff that you just listed there, what we get, is magic beans for a cow. I mean, we have a situation where we estimated that it would take them 2 to 3 months to have a viable nuclear weapon right now. And this deal, which is going to last for all time, makes it like 12 months for them to have a viable nuclear weapon if they should decide to. They can unilaterally suspend this at any moment. You got some really good negotiators on our side when they announce on Twitter that Allah has answered their prayer. The leading world sponsor of Islamic terrorism says Allah has answered our prayer, and then refers to the sanctions that the global community had placed on Iran as illegal, inhumane, and tyrannical. Now, are we negotiating in good faith with people who view us as law-breaking, barbaric tyrants? And we're all now celebrating that somehow we've got this friendly relationship and we're on equal ground with these folks? The whole thing is a sham, and I hope that the guys in Congress will stand up against this.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, Bill? Yeah.
Unlike American citizens, Iranians read history, and they don't have to go back far in history either. All they have to do is go back 30 or 40 years. Let's not forget, by the way, that the person who's making this deal on behalf of the most powerful republic in the history of the world, the bastion of freedom and democracy on the face of earth, is this Botox ninny whose previous negotiations with the North Korean regime was to deal with an enemy regime while in uniform to bring about the defeat of the United States of America while an act of war was shooting. That's who we've got sending out there doing this deal for us. John Kerry representing the United States of America. I don't think we can talk about this deal without saying that.
Well, that's true, Bill. Although, to be fair to John Kerry, this deal has been praised today by our good friend Vladimir Putin. That's no joke. That's no exaggeration.
Imagine my
folks. Yeah, folks, you have to laugh, Scott, or you're going to cry. In my mind, the big issue isn't whether Iran gets nukes or not, because simply extending America's nuclear umbrella over our friends in the Middle East ought to do the trick, and failing that, an American or an Israeli bombing campaign still isn't out of the question. If not under this commander-in-chief, then perhaps under the next one. You see, a rogue Iran with a nuclear program isn't any harder to contain than a rogue Iran with a slightly impaired nuclear program. We still haven't reached that threshold yet of nuclear weapons. But rogue Iran may be a thing of the past. By negotiating in good faith with Tehran, by ignoring decades of terrorism, murder, war, and religious dictatorship, President Obama has graced the Islamic Republic with something that country could never have earned on its own: legitimacy. Getting our hostages released, ending Iran's state-sponsored terrorism, getting Assad to step down, restoring Iraq's independence. President Obama just made these goals that much harder to achieve, maybe impossible. And for the second time, Obama has turned his back on the decent people of Iran who want nothing more than a decent government to represent them. 4 years ago, on the assassination of Osama bin Laden and his burial at sea by the U.S. Navy, my friend and colleague Scott Ott here said, and this is a quote, "Mr. President, by ordering U.S. military personnel to administer Islamic burial rites, you have baptized this heinous heathen into the religion with which you claim we are not at war." So you see, folks, lending legitimacy to those who chant death to America is something of a habit for this American president. From that, you may draw whatever conclusions you will. For PJTV, I'm Steve Green.